And welcome to the formal Act 46 Study Committee, August 10th, 6 p.m. We are at the middle school library. Thanks for the change of venue. Didn't confuse too many people. Tonight we're going to be working with Dan French, our consultant, who's been taking us through this. Before we move on to passing the minutes, I thought it might be good just to risk a summary, if you all would just bear with me on that. And some of this is for people who might be watching, but we have been working on setting up a proposal for an Act 46 merger that will emphasize equity and quality of education through greater consistency and better coordination, higher achievement of students through more teaching and less management, and better monitoring, more flexibility and transferring of resources, less time spent on budgets, more efficient grant processes, fewer handoffs, and better deployment of expertise. We're also looking at increasing transparency by having one budget, one tax rate, and one board instead of 7. And we're thinking about better education value for citizens through numerous financial efficiencies that would be realized by this merger. So there are a lot of different things that we've put together, but that's really why we're here. We've also come to the conclusion that we should be thinking about the same board structure as the Monmouth Union High School has, the hybrid at large model. We've determined that in this process, Bennington would be a necessary town and the rest of the towns would be advisable. We've looked at incentives, 4 years of incentives that we could get, which would be substantial, preserving Woodford's small schools grant, and hopefully saving over $100,000 in efficiency. Jeff! At our last meeting, we voted to move forward with forming a merged district. And if you read the minutes, Dan was quoted as saying that we have a dynamic opportunity to become a more high-functioning district. So I think that's what we're after. Tonight we're going to be looking at the merger study and articles of agreement and hoping to get something to the Agency of Education next week. So first order of business would be to look at the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to see the minutes? If there are any additions or changes?
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Second. Any comments?
I abstain, I didn't see him.
You didn't see them? Okay, so all in favor say aye. Aye. One abstention. Quick shout out to Richard Bump, who writes the best minutes ever. Thank you, Richard. Keep up the good work. So Dan, I think at this point we'd like to move on to what you have for us, which is the merger study report and articles of agreement, right?
Right. Okay. Good evening. So after your vote last week, or was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I forget now. It's so much fun. The committee determined it was advisable. So what you're doing now is finalizing the documents that go to the Agency of Education, and then they approve them for submission to the State Board of Education. So all along the timeline of this committee's work has to a certain extent been driven by the opportunity to get incentives. You might remember the previous to this spring that the incentives were going to expire for forming this kind of district, but the legislature in June created an extension to that deadline on November 30th. So that's sort of been the driving force behind the timeline issue. So our goal was to ensure that if the voters were to approve this, that incentives would be available. So we're on track to do that. Basically, tonight you have the first draft, this document that's on the screen, Merger Study Report, Articles of Agreement. There's 2 documents that go to the agency. One is the worksheet outline that we've been working from as a template, and then this document, the study report, which also includes the Articles of Agreement. So what we're seeking to do tonight, I know this is the first draft and it's a lengthy document, just kind of go through it. I'll point out some changes and some narrative that I created, based on your conversations, and go through that, give you the opportunity to ask questions with the goal ultimately of having this committee approve the merger report, and we can start the process at the state level. Why don't I'll just start by going through this, and we can open it up for questions as I go along. I would say firstly, this is, I would say it's a small size report, about maybe medium size report. So we knew, as I was talking with your superintendent, due to the expedited nature of this study, it wasn't going to be War and Peace, if you will, you know. But hopefully it'll work. There's basically two audiences of this document. One is the state, as they consider, and the state board, as they consider approving this proposal, and then the second consumers of this information are the voters themselves. So this document is designed to provide some narrative behind the committee's work and behind the committee's recommendation. And it goes, you know, the goal here was to put this before the voters and let them ultimately decide the issue. In terms of an executive summary, which starts on page 4 of the document, you can start to see, if you had a chance to go through this, I think it gives you a sense of how the MUD aspect plays out a little bit. So we've got a couple things going on. One is all the districts are members of the Mount Anthony Union School District, so therefore it's going to require all of these districts to vote on it. It doesn't mean they have to approve it, it just requires all member districts have to vote, and that means North Bennington. So North Bennington is listed as an advisable district to this merger process. Advisable districts don't necessarily have to warn the vote. It's up to the school boards in their communities whether they want to warn it or not. So that's sort of the first thing to think about, is that the North Bennington School Board would have to be amenable to warning this. They could, of course, be forced to warn it through a petition process in their community, but it will require them to at least hold the vote in their community for this to happen. Even if their community votes no, they still need to hold the vote in order for the rest of it to go forward. That being said, Bennington, you decided Bennington would be the necessary district, so no merger at all would be possible without Bennington approving this. And then it's going to require a majority of the 5 districts. There's 5 districts that are members of Mount Anthony. It's going to require a majority of 3 to enact the merger. So I'll just pause for a minute. So Bennington's a necessary district, so therefore they have to approve it. North Bennington's a member of Mount Anthony, and therefore they have to hold the vote. They don't necessarily have to approve it, but they have to hold the vote. And then, that being said, Bennington has to approve it, and then 2 others would have to approve it in order to enact the merger. So a total of 3. Those 3 would go forward and form a modified union district. Any districts that voted no would still be required to submit a merger plan to the state by December of this year, and probably ultimately would be forced to merge into this configuration anyway. That's my humble opinion. So that's laid out in the executive summary a bit of how this would work. And then, you know, a brief summary of the financial implications, which we kind of discussed, that, you know, with this kind of merger, although we are anticipating some savings, approximately $100,000, that's a guesstimate in savings just in education spending on an annualized basis. The basic effect of this kind of merger, when I say this kind of merger, meaning we're not closing schools or restructuring things, basically what happens is that all the money, all the spending, all the students kind of get pooled into one model, and then the tax rate of the new district becomes sort of the average, if you will, tax rate of all the districts. So we just add all the ed spending together, divided by all the pupils, following the state formula, and basically come out with an average or a mean tax rate. So with this kind of approach, there's going to be winners and losers on that in terms of taxes going up or taxes going down. If 3 districts enact the merger, the incentives will be available. So the incentives are really designed to soften the blow for those districts that end up on the south side of the mean tax rate. So there's some narrative in here that describes the process. I took a lot of that from your previous committee's meetings minutes. I hope I've got that accurate. On page 6, the committee findings, those come from the bullet points that we prepared for the worksheet. Tax rate implications, you've sort of seen before with some narrative. Table 1 is the same one you've seen before. Table 2 was one you had asked me to do without North Bennington, so you'll see the effect of the calculation, the aggregated ed spending, aggregated equalized pupils without including North Bennington, and basically that's a penny difference than the other numbers.
2
And then-
pennies for Bennington.
Huh?
2 pennies for Bennington.
Yeah, overall, about a penny, yeah, okay. And then there was a member of the audience last time, I think one of your state reps asked me to include CLA information, so I did table 3, which includes CLA. The reason I didn't include CLA before is because it sort of affects both sides of the equation, so mathematically it doesn't affect the merger per se. So we apply the CLA to the merged tax rate as we do local to each local tax rate, so it sort of nets itself out, but there it is. So you can see what that's like. So once again, the idea of forming a merged district is this district will produce a single tax rate. That tax rate, however, is adjusted locally based on each community's CLA. Getting into a list of assets and liabilities. Some of this is now, I don't think you've seen a lot of this aggregated before, so that's now available, including reserve funds. I think that the reserve fund part was the part you hadn't seen before, so table 6 perhaps is new. There's one other set of financial information I obtained recently that I'll include, and that has to do with impact aid, which is an important consideration. I think Woodford in particular receives a great deal of impact aid. So I'll be including a table on impact aid as well as some narrative about impact aid. I've dealt with this issue before in my community up north in Sunderland, Vermont. Sunderland also is a recipient of a significant amount of impact aid. My understanding of this, and it gets a little hazy because it is a federal program, my understanding is that impact aid is administered by the U.S. Department of Education to assist communities that have large parts of their grand list located in national forest or national lands. The impact aid money goes directly to the school district. So what we learned through my experience with Sunderland was that if the district merges, say Woodford becomes part of a merger, the impact aid money is still available, but it'll come to the school district that has the lands in those national lands, not the community of Woodford. So it'll go to the new school district as a revenue source. So it becomes a revenue of the new school district, not a revenue of Woodford. That's all accounted for in this idea of using education spending and equalized pupils because of the extent that Woodford had used those funds to lower its education spending. That's captured in the model, so the model remains valid. But it's just, I'll include some narrative on that. I didn't have the information prior to, but it is a significant amount of money and it should be addressed as part of the report. Getting into governance and representation. On the top of page 16, table 8, will list the board configuration. I did some research on other MUDs, I'll call them. Basically we don't have to do any other configuration model. I was talking last time about, if such and such a district votes no, how does it change the configuration? They're still members of the Mount Anthony district, so they're still part of the MUD in terms of that portion. What you see is some language, and it's sort of introduced here in narrative. These districts, these elementary forming districts that are not members of the complete K-12 district would be expected to recuse themselves from participating in deliberations and voting on relevant elementary school operations. But the representation of the board doesn't change. There's this provision now included in the Articles of Agreement that binds them or basically forces them to recuse themselves if matters pertaining to elementary school operations are brought before that board. So that's how it's been dealt with.
That simplifies things.
That's how it's been dealt with. Yeah, and I was pleased to save me from creating 16 different variations of your voting structure. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. I put in a blurb about supervisory union configuration because that's something that will need to be addressed. It's not something you can deal with per se as part of this merger because the way the law is written, it's something that falls to the SU board itself. But I would assume that you're going to want to think about reconfiguring the SU board configuration since if this merger is successful, a large number of the students in the supervisory union will now be housed in one school district, and The law provides a default mechanism for configuring supervisory union boards. If you operate a school, you get 3 members, and if you don't operate a school, you get 1 member. So that's probably something you're going to want to look at. And there's a mechanism to look at it, but that mechanism resides with the supervisory union board itself. So basically, they would petition the state board to modify the structure if the merger is successful. Putting it here just gives the state board a heads up to expect that kind of petition should the merger be successful.
So there are no decisions or no debates we have to have about this right now? There's
No.
nothing we can do about it?
Yeah, the committee's function is to sort of do this analysis and lay out where the issues are.
Okay.
And this is an issue that no doubt will come up. And it's an issue on part of the voters that they should be aware about, I would think. So I included it here. It's something we didn't really talk about, but I'm thinking it's going to be a concern. Okay, so that's the narrative of the report. Then the articles of agreement themselves. One of the issues, basically 2 issues tonight that need to be decided, I would think, to really keep moving forward. One is the name of the new district, and 2, the date upon which the vote would be held. So we can come back to those in a minute, but it just reminded me that I have quote-unquote new unified district and a bracket to say insert name of district. So that's something that needs to be figured out sooner rather than later. So Article 1 describes the narrative around the configuration, which describes the 5-member districts, Bennington being a necessary. 2 other districts, including Bennington, would have to approve it in order for it to be formed as a modified, what I call throughout the rest of the articles, a modified union district. But the way this is set up, it has to anticipate everyone approving it as well. So you kind of see that as you read through the articles. It addresses both the new unified district, which would mean everyone, including North Bennington, would approve it, or the modified union district, some permutation thereof. So that sets that up in Article 1. Article 2, there's no other districts that are advisable to the merger. The grades to be operated by the union district, you'll be operating K through 12. No new schools will be constructed. First year of district operations.
Dan, it's probably worth I think everybody's read this. I hope everybody's read this, but it's probably worth noting that only some of the people went through kind of the creation of the first round of these articles. So after each one of these substantial ones, we should probably just pause and make sure everybody is on board with it.
Yeah. So Article 5 looks, Article 1 so far is the only one of substance.
Right.
That's a narrative, basically technical narrative explaining the voting circumstances. And I will say, once you guys kind of move closer to the final version of this, one of the things we'll do through the district's attorneys, have the attorneys sign off on these in case of the technical issues. Article 1 is a technical sort of description of the merger itself. Articles 2, 3, and 4, pretty straightforward. These are just required to be addressed. And I don't think we're planning on constructing any new schools. Article 5, there's some things that are required relative to you affirming that the new district would honor collective bargaining agreements and so forth. And that's the gist of this. It basically says, the new district will take over, but there's some things we're going to be required to respect and honor as part of the merger.
Let me just pause here, and Jim, I'm going to put you on the spot. Jim Colkeen, you've read this article, but you also raised the issue of collective bargaining and existing contracts. Are you satisfied with what this says here?
Yes.
Okay. So this covers. All right.
Yeah, it's pretty boilerplate in most of the merger. Basically, what happens upon formation of the union district, I believe you have 45 days to notify any bargaining unit that you would love to reopen the bargaining contract and start over.
Okay.
So that's required as per law, and it's required that you state that.
I anticipate less issues because we do have a unified contract.
Yeah.
I mean, seniority issues by district would probably be the one thing that would need to be worked on.
Yeah. This just says you're respectful of the current agreements and you're anxious and looking forward to a positive opportunity to work through these things. So you can't use merging as a way to escape your obligation under a collective bargaining agreement.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Article 6, assumed indebtedness. This is the default sort of language once again. The new district would become effective on July 1st, 2019. Assets and liabilities of the districts as of June 30, the day before, if they're still there, will become liabilities and assets of the new school district. So it gives the current districts an opportunity to address, basically transfer assets if they so choose to do that.
Now, both those say 2019. Should one be 2018 and the other one 2019?
No, it's the day before.
Day before.
So June 30, 2019. As of midnight, July 1, 2019, everything
Okay.
flips over.
Got it.
Good catch though. Ask those things because I hope I didn't mess any of that up. The lawyer will catch them too, hopefully. I think I've got it right.
Yes.
Dan, this includes all the, even districts that voted not to merge.
No, if they're districts that vote no, they don't get caught up in this at all. The districts that vote no will probably get caught up on it later on as part of the state mandatory part of it. But
That's what I was wondering.
yeah, this part of it though is just those that vote yes.
You mentioned to me earlier today that districts that, if districts are forced in through the mandatory process, the incentives do not apply to those districts?
That's correct. So only
So-
those districts that vote affirmatively prior to November 30th, 2017 are eligible for the incentives.
So, okay,
And we've seen the state take a hard line on that relative to the June 30, 2017 deadline as well. So there's those districts that decide later on to join or something like that don't necessarily avail themselves of the incentives.
okay, great.
Article 7, and I speak to something, this is a sort of a technical aspect of this. So Article 7 refers to transfer of real property shall implemented as prescribed by Article 10. So this brings up a very important issue, this issue of Article 10. So the way we're basically working through an outline of articles of agreement that comes from 706. Remember 706, the statute doesn't come from Act 46, it comes from this older statute, 706. And this issue of Article 10 goes to the point of how these articles of agreement can be modified at some point in the future. 706 says the new school board can modify these articles as they see fit, unless the articles, those things that are voted on explicitly by the voters. So Article 10, when we look at Article 10, it includes things that the voters, it's basically the ballot information that gets presented directly to the voters. So the idea is to put things into Article 10 that you don't want to see easily modified by a future school board, that only the voters themselves can modify the terms of the merger, essentially. So
Because the
that's
school board can modify the other articles.
That's correct. But except for anything, because the voters are going to vote on what's in Article 10, therefore the law basically says they voted on it, they approved it, therefore only they can modify it. Okay, so the idea is things you put in Article 10 are those things you really don't want to see modified easily by a school board. So one of the issues, Article 7, the transfer of real property, the terms by which that happens is something that ends up in this Article 10. Likewise, school board configuration, Article 10. Okay. Article 9 lays out the staggering of the terms of office. I had created this last time. I don't know if you've had any thoughts since then, but basically you have to initially lay out a basis by which the board members come up for re-election on a rotated basis. Only about a third of them come up each year, so you're not having a huge turnover year at the school board. So when a new school district's created through this process, you have to stagger the terms of office. So I divided them up so that, you have 3, 4, and 4. But that can be arranged lots of different
Is
ways.
there any way we can put Pownell and Shasberry as a 3-year term?
Yeah, I mean, it can be
I think
done.
it'd be nice to have, the Bennington, Pownell, Shasberry, and Woodford all have that 3-year term for the first one. And so everybody has equal say.
Yeah, I mean, it can be set up. The only real requirement in the law is that about a third of them expire in any given year.
Yeah.
So if you move some to one column, you got to move some out of the other column.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's something to talk about.
Yeah, that's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Can we put in something here about term limits and, is this the place where you put it?
Yeah, the law basically, I don't think you can. The law says each term shall be 3 years.
I'm talking about forever. I don't want to see
Oh.
people on board forever.
I think,
Have a beginning and an end.
yeah, I don't think you can do that. Be a question
Can't
for
do
the,
that where?
you can't put it in here because the law basically says the voters can choose whoever they want to be on the school board. So you run into these boundaries where you can't, and I said, I think in our first meeting, you can do lots of things in these except for illegal things. And one of the, I say illegal things, the idea is that those
Well,
things that,
I think we gotta see the legal people and get it changed so we can do what we
yeah,
want.
yeah, it would require change in statute.
Well, then I think we should do that,
Yeah,
make that part of this.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's Article 9. So getting into Article 10, now this is, this point about what goes before the voter. So it basically says the voter shall consider the following, substantially the same language, and here it is. It lays out, sort of what they would vote on. This is actually what would be on the ballot. Once again, this is something the attorney would have to review. But getting into the necessary advisable, sort of a rephrasing of Article 1, restatement of the grades operated, Article 3, the modification of the staggering of the terms, this idea of non-member elementary districts, that they would be required to recuse themselves from consideration and voting upon programmatic, budgetary, personnel, or building matters of the district, which correlate to grades governed by the non-operating or by the elementary school districts. Real estate. So basically, what goes on here is that the properties would be sold unless if they're still assets of the school district on June 30, 2019, they'd be sold to the new district for $1. So we have to include language as to what happens if the new school district doesn't need those properties anymore, and basically it requires the new school district to dispose the properties back to the towns for the same consideration, subject to all encumbrances and so forth, except for the building we're in now in Mount Anthony. It's hard to imagine, but in the case where the new school district decided it didn't want to use this building anymore, or the high school, number C, or letter C, 4C, talks about selling these properties at real market value and returning the proceeds to the member communities in proportion to their populations. So if Bennington was 50% of the population, Bennington would get 50% of the proceeds of the sale of these buildings and so forth. So that's how most districts deal with Union District properties.
Dan, could I back you up for
Yep.
just a minute? I stumbled on the wording in, I guess it's the last paragraph of 3. But will recuse themselves from consideration voting upon programmatic, et cetera,
Yeah,
which correlate to grades governed by the NMED.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that be grades not governed by the?
no, the NMED refers to the non-member elementary districts.
Right,
So the grades that they govern are those elementary school grades.
but
So they would,
you're asking them to recuse themselves from a vote which on items that correlate to their grades.
right,
Gotcha.
because the the item would be coming before this modified union board, which is a K-12 board. So
Yeah.
the case would be the Mount Anthony board would be now a K-12 board. And it's going to consider some issue relative to Bennington Elementary School, an elementary issue. The districts that are not members of Mount Anthony relative to the elementary grades should recuse themselves from voting on an issue relative to elementary grades. Because they operate schools at those levels.
So if Shasbury didn't vote in, and we had a seat on the board, we'd have to excuse from elementary.
Right, you have your own issues on elementary, you would be required to recuse yourselves from voting on elementary issues because you have your own elementary school.
We would vote on MAU issues.
That's right. Does that make sense, Dick?
Yeah, I just read it as the
Yeah.
reverse of that, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's kind of twisted, but this I would say is pretty typically how it gets set up.
I understood the concept, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about selling Mount Anthony. In D, I'm on 4D, talks about the towns. If the sale goes back to the town, they need to use it for community or public purposes for a minimum of 5 years. So can't use a merger process to get into arbitrage and speculative land.
Do real estate development.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
Right. And there is, I'm sure, in the construction of this building and in Mount Anthony Union High School, there is state funds involved. Usually the state was at that point giving 30% construction aid, so the state's going to want to see its money refunded as well. The law requires that they be refunded percentage of the sale price equal to the percentage of the construction aid. So most likely, if you sold Mount Anthony Union High School, you'd be refunding the state 30% of the sale price. Transfer of funds. Once again, the member districts would have an opportunity to divert assets prior to June 30, but any assets that are still assets of the districts would become property of the new district. 5C, specified funds. Funds that are set aside with specific endowments or restrictions would be set up that way under the new school district as well. So if there was a fund for the renovation of the Woodford School, the new district would have such a fund as well, and it would be restricted for use for the Woodford School. We didn't talk much about Australian ballot, but I assume that's what you use for Mount Anthony right now. Is that correct, Jim? Yeah, so that's probably easiest thing to do is to maintain the same methodology of voting that the voters are used to. The voters could change this at some point in the future, but it's probably the easiest thing to do. 7 just says that the merger report and the articles of agreement are also part of this agreement. Operating date.
Jim, sorry, Dan, before you get there, you and I talked this afternoon about moving Article 13 to 10.
Yeah, I've got, we'll bring
Want
that
to
up.
talk about that when you get to it?
Yeah, I'll bring it up,
Okay.
I think, in a second.
Okay.
See what the committee thinks about it. So we're going to talk a minute about school closure. That's what Donald and I were kind of chatting about. I think that's something the committee needs to weigh in on. Operating date, basically says the other districts will still exist for a bit, but will be shut down as soon as practicable, no later than, I think, December, somewhere in there it says, or maybe it's in another part, but yeah, it's in Article 12. So such business shall complete as soon as practicable, no later than December 31st, 2019, when the forming district shall cease to exist.
So you have the positions, are those being voted in to be functional as of July 1, 2019?
Can you rephrase that? I didn't catch what you're... The school board members?
Yeah, the new, of the MUD.
Yeah, the new school board members would actually be elected on the same date as the merger vote itself. So one of the things that would happen, if you approve this, if the state board approves it, and we shift into the process of warning this for a vote, one of the things that would be on the warning is a ballot for election for the board members. Their term of office would begin immediately upon the organizational meeting of the district. So about 45 to 60 days. Say the voters vote for this, and by November 1st, there's a 30-day period where a period goes by where no petition for a revote is filed. The Secretary of State will certify the creation of the new municipality. And then there's about a 45 to 60-day period where the Secretary of Education has to convene the first meeting of the school district, of the voters. Mm-hmm. At that meeting, a treasurer is elected. There's a few formal things that need a moderator and so forth, and the date of the annual meeting is set. As of that meeting, the new school board members begin their term of office. Mm-hmm. At that point, they're not operating any schools, but they have a year to start working on policies and preparing a budget and so forth.
So
at that time period, everything will still exist.
Okay, so the former groups are all functioning until December 31st, 2019.
Right. Yep.
While the new group is really starting up how it's going to work.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and they don't have any operational control over anything. They basically start working on policies, but then in the fall of 2018, they would start working on a budget to propose to the voters at their annual meeting.
Is there any reason, Dan, somebody that's currently on one of the boards that might or might not be merged could not be on the ballot for that?
No.
So you could serve on both?
Absolutely. Yeah,
if it
it's
went that
actually,
way.
in my opinion, it's one of the preferred things is to have some people that have been on the transition or at least have some governing experience on other boards. It's very helpful. But no, there's just the restrictions that are in law. You can't be a lister. Or there's certain offices that conflict with each other. And then the way we have set up your slate of officers, they have to be, if you're the Pownell rep, you have to be from Pownell. You have to be a resident voter, or resident of Pownell. and so forth. But no, there's no restriction at all.
Would
Okay.
that
Great.
coincide with the March election, or you set your own election?
So their initial elections would be when this merger vote happens. So the voters would consider, they would have an election while this vote is being presented. Initially, that's the first one. And then we have those staggered,
So you're making the big election
yeah,
of moving forward and electing the
Yep.
people that would be on the board at the same time?
yep, absolutely,
So you'd have to get the signatures
Right.
before
yeah.
November 1st.
Yeah, highly competitive situation, yeah, absolutely.
So you do have to get the
The
signatures,
signatures.
yeah.
Yeah, you have to get petitioned on, so if you were, if you're slotted to be a Pownell rep, I keep using Pownell, you'd have to get on the ballot through a petition process in the town of Pownell, okay? And that would get you on the ballot. The ballot, though, would include everybody. You chose to do at-large voting, so you'd have all the directors on there, and every community would vote on all the directors. But in order to get on it, you have to be from one of those communities and present a petition in that community.
So the first election and the merger for
Simultaneously,
simultaneously.
yeah,
So you have a month and a half to figure this out if you want to run.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
But you very well could have people elected and not have the merger go through.
That's correct,
And it-
in which case it wouldn't
Yeah.
be void. Yeah, and the other, the ballots are not commingled, in a way that's set up for the merger. It's in the narrative in Article 1, the ballots are not, so meaning Shasbury's ballots are kept over here, Pownell's are kept over here. So if your community votes against the merger, but your person goes forward, your person comes off the list, in that regard. So we have to figure that out, but it happens all the time.
And when they be on the list for MAU though?
That's correct, they could be, depending on how we restructure the district, so. And that's why you have the staggered terms. Basically, the folks would serve until the next election. And if you fail to get people on, the new board can appoint them until the next election. So all the regular mechanics of that apply. Okay, I think we're on to school closure. So I went on vacation, Jim went on the vacation, so we didn't connect on school closure language, and we talked briefly last time. I think this is an issue that you're going to want to include some specific protections on. And we didn't have time to generate it for this document because I wrote this prior to going on a vacation. Yeah.
Don't you already have the language in Article 4 of the old Articles of Agreement?
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to put on the screen in a minute. So I didn't have that information at the time, so I have it now.
Because it looks like the wording works with the exception of, you suggested adding suspend
Yeah.
to the
So I wanted,
statement. but-
if I could, I want to put something on the screen so you can take a look at and see what you think about this. So the first one, I don't know if you can see that. I'll blow it up a little bit. Hopefully. There we go. You see that better? Maybe? Hang on, I'll get it all up there. Pretty good. Okay, so this is the language from the last merger study committee. This is the work they came up with. I'll let you read it, then I'll sort of walk you through it a little bit. Okay, so firstly is this merger would qualify as a RED, or Regional Education District, and therefore includes the language from Act 153 that protects small schools from being closed in the first 4 years of the merger. So that's why this language talks about the first 5 years. In the first 4 years, it's automatically protected under the law. So in the first 4 years, Act 153 says, no school can be closed without the express approval of the voters in the community where the school is located. So that's in the law, automatically. Can't change that. So first 4 years of the merger, no school can be closed without the approval of the voters of the town where the school is located. Question is, to what extent do you want to include language beyond that? And many districts do. So, or many mergers do. It depends politically on how important that is to you. The other side of this, however, is the idea that, the purpose of Act 46 is to create a larger board over larger schools that's going to make probably some tougher decisions about putting more kids under one roof, which is ultimately how efficiency gets gained. Doesn't necessarily provide the best political solution locally, but it creates greater efficiency. So where's the striking balance between these two concepts? And it gives you the opportunity to provide greater protections beyond a 4-year period if you think it's necessary. One of the things that happens, generally speaking, in these types of clauses, one is an extension beyond the 4 years. So in this case, you have the first 5 years, so it's a 1 year beyond the 4 years. Secondly, a common approach is to require a challenging board vote, in this case a 75% supermajority of the school board, so not just the simple majority, but a 75% majority of the school board, so making it challenging for the school board to do it. It basically says it's got to be really obvious, good idea. In this, you also have a 2 vote in this one, which is something I hadn't seen before, but it's totally doable. 2 consecutive votes with at least 1 year between the 2 votes. So you have a supermajority, 75%, 2 votes to the school board, and 1 year between the 2 votes. Prior to holding the vote, the board has to hold 2 public hearings. Those are sort of non-binding referendums, if you will, to see if there's public input. And one of those meetings needs to be in the community where the school is located.
Dan, in the last version of this committee, we worked really hard on this, and
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time getting there. And I wonder if somebody who was on that last committee would like to speak to, I don't know, Dick or Jeff or somebody who, how we got here and kind of how we struck the balance.
Well, all right, I'll open my mouth first, I guess.
You go first, Dick.
I think I was concerned, I think we were all concerned about the concept of small schools. Any of us could become small schools depending on how our ADM changes. But Woodford probably felt that was better protection, and we didn't think...
Sorry, Dick, could you speak up a little bit, please?
We didn't think 75% majority vote from the board presented any problem for the board, and it certainly protected Woodford in that case. I don't remember a whole lot of
I think we just threw it out
discussion
there.
against that concept.
Yeah, I think we just threw it out there. It started at majority, 51%. 75 just offers more security, I think, for the smaller schools, especially Woodford. And I think we went the 2 votes because, if it's tight for the first vote, you would effectively have a board change the next year, which could change the vote. So you can either petition for that closing or not for that closing based on the board makeup, I'm guessing.
And the way I remember it, we wanted to make as high a bar as possible, but still leave room for reasonable, if we had big changes in demographics or something like that, that we would leave room for reasonable movement with lots of due diligence.
And it might not be a small school closing, it could be a medium-sized school. You close one of the 3 Bennington schools and, put them under, 3 roofs instead of 4 roofs or 5 roofs. If you throw a pound on Shasbury, you could move Bennington kids, throughout the 4 other buildings versus 5. So, there is wiggle room to go all directions.
And this, I should point out, also extends the 75% majority to that 4-year period immediately after the merger. So it not only adds a year to the 4-year period, but it puts the supermajority and the 2-vote mechanism involved into the first 4 years as well, which is legal. So you can do that. So is this language the committee would like to see included?
If you could add, you suggested add or suspend, shall not close or suspend any schools, I think was your suggestion.
Yeah,
There
the
was
suspension, someone had mentioned that. I don't know the difference under the law. The law uses the term discontinue, close or discontinue the use of the school.
So the proposition would be to use discontinue then?
Yeah, it would be something like not close or discontinue. Whoop.
So discontinue the use of any school.
Yeah, I don't know, suspension is a term that would have to be defined further. Discontinue is well understood in the law. Okay. Close or discontinue the use of any schools within its boundaries.
Seems to me that the earlier group didn't have any problems with that kind of mistake.
I think what I also thought is that if you started a kid in a district at, kindergarten, the 5 years plus the 2, it gets them out of that elementary school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Which, you prepare incoming families. This is what's coming,
right,
plan accordingly.
yeah.
So
it's great to have a rationale like that instead of just an arbitrary sort of, Okay,
Yeah, I think we all
So-
agreed
So-
last time that it was okay, so
yeah.
I don't know if we need to.
So I guess the move, though, that we had talked about this afternoon is putting that into Article 10,
Yeah, so
so
what
that it
I,
becomes part of the vote.
yeah, so what I would do is, out here it's standing alone as Article 13, which means that the board could change this language if it so fit. So it's probably something, if it's a critical need to you, it would end up as a new Article 8 under Article 10, or number 8 under Article 10, so it's something only the voters can modify. Right? Yeah. I think John made a motion.
I'm sorry.
I'll
Make a
second.
motion to put it-
Would you like to make a motion in a second? All right, so I'm not sure we need a motion on this at this point, but would you
good.
like to take it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it saves me editing, I know what you want, so.
Okay, so John, are you making the motion to accept that language and to move it to Article 10?
Move it on Article 10 next week.
Okay, all right. So anybody have any question about the motion on accept the language as modified, prior school closure language as modified, and insert it in Article 10?
Article 10
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, great.
And there's a related issue as well, which deals with grade configuration. This is the idea of, under the law, school boards can control which neighborhoods attend which school, which grades are in each school. So I think the previous committee thought it was important to put some protections on that as well. So if you want to take a second and just read what's up here on the screen, and then we can talk about it a bit.
What does with parental consent mean?
So if the school board, my interpretation of this would be, if a school board wanted to, let's say there's a neighborhood over here that's closer to another school and the school board wants to redistrict this, they would need the parents' permission to do that.
Is that currently?
It's
the
not what the
policy-
law says, but
But how about it in the SEO?
No, currently they
The only one that we can
redistrict.
currently redistrict is Bennington.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
That
about.
language with parental consent isn't in.
It's not in there.
Shaftesbury had
Yeah, they did it,
an interest in
but it's fluffy.
preserving sections, didn't they? Based on real estate value and some other issues people wanted to,
I don't remember saying that.
okay.
so there's a couple things in here. One is the issue of student enrollment. Another one is grade designation, what grades will be at which school. So you could have, the new school board could decide, well, we're going to have K through 3 at Woodford and 4 through 6 is going to be here, So this issue of designation is also involved, or what grades are in there. And also grade configuration within a school. So the ability to say, oh, we're going to have 2 first grades or 3 kindergartners or whatever. So this is what you had before. I think it's the only legal issue I saw from my perspective was this last part right here. I don't think the school board can, or the committee, the voters can compel a school board to adopt a policy because that's the prerogative of the board. But I think this language could go into the narrative of the report, basically with the committee saying the committee strongly encourages the new school to adopt a policy that would allow for elementary school choice. So you could recommend that.
I'm going to speak to that one because I was adamant about that in the last iteration of the committee.
Yeah.
And frankly, Jim, you put the notion in my head, but the idea that there would be inter-district choice.
Yeah, a lot of people see that as a positive aspect.
And if people really weren't happy in the school they were in, that there would, grade school they were in, that there would be other options for them to go
Right.
within a relatively small drive. So I really feel strongly that whatever we can do to make
Yep.
inter-district choice available would be something I think the voters would appreciate.
Yeah, I
So
see it,
among
a lot of people see it as a benefit of these types of mergers. I worry about your authority to compel a school board to pass such a policy. What I did is I sort of took some liberty and rephrased this a little bit. So if you want to take a look at what
Can
I've
you-
written here.
Can
Yeah.
we not leave the
Yep.
first part? Okay. I just want to,
So, going, what Dick was saying about Shaftesbury, I can relate to that. I live on Town Line Road, and one half of the road goes to Bennington, the other half goes to Shaftesbury. So, were you saying earlier that could parents on that road go to the school board and say, we want to be a part of Shaftesbury School as opposed to a Bennington school?
That's a different animal, because I think there's actually a independent school district. Those voters that go, or those people that go to North Bennington are actually part of the North Bennington Independent School District.
No, this is
Bennington
Bennington,
and
Shaftesbury. On East Road, there's a section where I think, correct me if I'm right, I think some people live in Bennington, but their kids go to Shaftesbury.
yeah.
Or is it it's right on the
It's the
line?
opposite.
No, it's right on the line,
It's right on the line.
like on the same road.
So the Bennington School Board
The
allows
line goes-
students to go
Bus
to,
actually is running through
Right.
right.
Bennington,
Correct.
picking up some people.
I mean, you're talking, it's the sliver of
Town Line
maybe Town Line Road, and it's also Upper Chapel on Spar Lane. Those
So
are Shaftesbury
Bennington
students.
resident pupils attend Shaftesbury School because it's geographically more convenient.
No, they
No,
don't.
they're actually in
No, they
Shaftesbury
don't.
by, literally the road's cut in half by.
So what do
So
they
the
do?
neighbor is in Bennington
Yes.
and the person across the street is in Shaftesbury.
Yeah.
Both buses are running up and
Yeah.
down the
Yeah.
street,
Yeah,
but no one's going out of their own town.
got it.
Yes.
So that's, yeah. So to your question, it'll just make it simpler though. If say it's all in Bennington and a neighborhood in Bennington and folks wanted to petition their school board to go to a different school, yeah, they could politically do that. The school board also under its own authority could just say, look, we've looked at enrollment patterns, we've got space in this other school, we're gonna have to do this. And what this language says is before they could do that, in this time period, it would require the parental permission.
I think
Of all the
that,
parents involved?
Any
or is it a
individual,
household?
any individual parent, yeah, I mean, it doesn't talk about.
We could require with written parental consent from one or more of their legal guardians or something like that.
in simplest terms, if I remember when this was put in, the concern was that a child from Shaftesbury could, right now the school district lines are town boundary lines. That goes away. But what we're saying, but for 5 years, we would still respect those town boundary lines. And after that, the board could decide that it might be better to balance enrollment by some students from Bennington maybe going up to Shaftesbury Elementary or Pownell or the other way around, or up to Woodford. But we can't do that for 5 years.
So you could remove parental consent out of that and just say, this is how it's gonna be for 5 years, and then after
That
that,
might be
it's,
simpler.
and then it's what
It
the
might be
law
simpler,
provides,
yeah.
which is the school board can do.
For the first
Then
sentence.
because the parent can ask for it.
Yep,
However, the parent asks for it, who's responsible about the kid?
that's a whole nother issue, right? So the district under Vermont law doesn't have to provide any transportation, so, but it sounds, I think what Jim's saying is that if the intent was to sort of honor those town boundaries, then the simpler language would be to say, during those 5 years, the district or the school of enrollment will be the same as they are now, that there will be no sort of inter-district, unless you get into that school choice issue, okay, where parents want to voluntarily do that, and the district has some lottery process to do it. But the point is that during that 5-year period, the school board wouldn't arbitrarily seek to shuffle attendance patterns.
So you're
That's
getting
fine.
rid of the second sentence.
Second sentence, yeah, which is confusing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
I'd say strike it.
Yeah, agree.
So what does that mean for, because aren't there Shaftesbury students that go to North Bennington?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
My
It's
under.
a can of worms.
No, it isn't. It is. It's very simple. Because I don't have a real solid understanding of it. But my understanding of that is that those students are actually part of a different school district.
That district is non-operational anymore. So where do they go?
That's right. So if they are residents of a non-operating school district, they have school choice.
But if they live in Shaftesbury?
But they are
they-
part of the North Bennington Independent School District.
Because that's just the way it is?
That's the way it was set up. So all this would be dissolved if, the North Bennington Independent School District is one of the parties to this merger. They get to vote yes or no. If they vote yes, all that gets dissolved. But my understanding, and it hasn't been confirmed yet, is those Shaftesbury residents who attend North Bennington Village School are also voters in the North Bennington Independent School District, those households. Okay? So independent school districts can transcend town boundaries. They're not town school districts.
You want to take another pass at it, Aaron?
So is it because they
No,
have
no,
school
seriously, I mean,
choice?
it's, you want
If
to
their
try
North
one more time
Bennington
on it, or?
Independent School District has school choice
No.
in grades K through
Right.
6 or K through 5. K through 6?
But it's not a
6.
clean line, that's the thing. Like, you have literally
Yeah, that's the problem. Is we don't
Donald's
know.
in District 1, District 2, District 2, District 1, District 2, District 2. Why are you in District 1 and you in District 1, but your two neighbors are in District 2, all
Right.
same side of the road?
Yeah, there's a
Right.
line somewhere that goes
There's
like,
the line that literally cuts around houses.
Do we
In North Bennington.
feel like we need to resolve this to
It's
move
actually
on?
Shaftesbury, so
That's-
Shaftesbury.
Oh, it's Shaftesbury.
That's where I have to resolve it at some point.
Do we feel like we need to resolve Aaron's?
Is that part of the in 5 years, you're gonna have to figure this out?
no,
Or,
no,
or
you-
it's always gonna be like that, because if North Bennington is now part of the one district.
That's if they vote.
if they
to
vote
be.
yes.
Which
If
is-
they vote no, which is more likely,
Right.
those people, that everything stays the same.
They stay where they are.
Even though Shaftesbury is part of the new district.
Yeah, because those, it's
So
not,
it's the same for those residents who go to North Bend. They stay the same, always
yeah,
going to North
because it
Bend.
has nothing to do with town boundaries, it's about district boundaries. Okay, these are school districts, not towns. So the school district that they're members of, coincidentally, part of it is in the town of Shaftesbury. But their school district, if it votes no, nothing changes for them. If they vote yes, the world changes for them.
All right, so it's based on districts and nothing
Yeah.
changes.
Right.
For 5 years.
Right.
Unless the
Dan,
parent puts in a
you had a
request.
question behind you there, Dan.
And currently, when we do requests from Bennington, I think a lot of your district transportation is on the parent. So they won't provide transportation if you stay within your district. So I imagine that would be, school choice is available, but trying to do a transportation system that would put people wherever they wanted to go would be very difficult.
All right, so would you be willing to put a space, Dan, after the second sentence, please, since we're treating that differently? Okay.
Well, he had to
He had
propose
to
down.
propose, didn't want to take a look at that.
Is
Yeah,
the
it's,
proposal-
we're working better on this. Mine is just the same kind of idea.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah,
You're
yeah, okay,
good. I was just trying to clean it up a little bit.
okay.
So I think firstly, if we're going to work from this, you can't say for at least the first 5 years. So you got to say the first 5 years, not,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so
Okay.
for the first 5 years.
Mm-hmm, yep.
So fully operational means not in this transition period, to the point Aaron was asking about. So in this transition period, nothing happens, right? The new
Mhm.
district exists, but it's in a planning mode. It's as of July 1, 2019.
Yep, school
So-
years.
Yep.
Would we
So-
want to say students will attend the elementary schools in the town of
Yeah.
residence?
So, but from a student, just perspective of being, like, just not being, trying to be as least disruptive in their development, does it make more sense to have students exist? Like, because if they're in kindergarten, they could have potential to move could they potentially move in Shaftesbury because we go to 6th grade? They have potential to move at 5th grade or placed into a different school for 6th grade? You see what I, like how,
So you're worried
Like, could you
about
say
someone
if they have
who's,
1 year left,
right. Like, so
can
if
they stay
have
in that
one-
school?
But
Right.
you're always gonna have that growth.
Right.
yeah,
I
so
think
you
no matter
can,
if you do 6 years, 7
Well, no,
years.
because if,
No, but I'm saying
if the
for
5
the-
years expires in 4th grade for a Shaftesbury kid, then they go to, I don't know,
So should the
Ben
language
L
be
for
more
5 and
that
6, that's a lot
grandfathering
different than
language.
going
Right,
for
like
just
you're
your final year.
grandfathered where you're at.
The practice that we do now is, we get requests from people. We do allow, again, while we're talking Bennington, because they're the only one that has 3 schools, but it's 5th grade, they've been at Molly Stark, and now the families move out of the zone, and they stay at Molly Stark for the 5th grade.
Let them stay.
I wouldn't say it's automatic, but it's we're pretty close to it, as long as they intend if they can do transportation, they can stay. And as Jeff started saying, it's never going to be completely clean, because then we get, well, I don't want my kid in 2 different schools, so if the 5th grader can stay, can the 2nd grader stay?
Oh.
And then the second.
You mean the sibling?
3rd
Right.
grader and wants
Yeah.
to stay. So at some point, there's always going to be, but we would consider on a case-by-case basis, what's best for the child, what's best for the family.
Right,
I'd say
and
it's
you don't
better
know,
if it's best for the
and this is
family,
saying in
too.
5 years that we could change it so that one school is K through 3 and one school's, so
Right.
it all depends on the configuration
right.
that's picked. It might not only be switching schools
How would this
and
group,
lines.
sort of to that point, how would this group feel about putting a waiting period in there? I know that's just another speed bump, but what about if we required 2 years' notice to the parents or something like that?
The more complicated you make
Yeah.
it.
I think
I don't know
I
why
think
we
it's
would
going
tie
to
our hands to the
inevitably
board.
be that
No.
Why do we
same
think that we can
concern.
control the board and make better decisions now than the
I
boards
mean,
in the future?
it's happened enough times in Bennington with
The board can
Beach
develop a
Street,
policy
Coral
on how
B,
to do it.
and Catamount closing. Everybody's been displaced in Bennington over the years.
Okay.
We gotta trust that the new board's gonna care about the same things we
And if you
care about.
allow that inter-district merger, or, school choice to occur, you could petition, if there's room.
Okay. I was just looking for a way to address Aaron's concern that was not quite like every kid gets to go all the way through.
I
Yeah,
think-
so why can't, I'm still confused, why can't you, instead of having language of 5 years and then it's like a toss-up, can you say you will, at the point that this merger happens, you will stay into that, if your kid is enrolled in the school currently, they will stay there and continue there.
Well, I
But-
think what Jim's saying is that, because there's allowances for that and just the human factor of,
Right, but then if you have to propose to, if you do get displaced, then you have to find your own transportation. It's kind of like a hardship to the family.
But what about okay, so say we instill it July 1st, but what about that kid that starts kindergarten the year after? They're going to have that
I
same.
would say currently enrolled.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you're going to have that same
Your sib-
situation going
I think the
on
sibling
over
thing is a real
time.
thing.
I think the
Right.
reason we
Yeah.
picked 5 years is if you do it the vote this year, if your kid's in kindergarten, by 2024, that child will be out of Shaftesbury. So as when the vote started, all the kids within the school are
Right.
going to be out of the school after that 5-year window, if my math's right. So you would know by this Christmas if there's potential chance of being shifted if you had a kindergarten. But you'd buy a house, I guess accordingly in the district at that point. I don't know.
How do you know? where
But would
that
they
you
is?
just
be?
can't plan that far
What's
because
that?
you've
Yeah.
got the sibling issue. I mean, you have like a
Definitely.
kindergartner starting in 2023, and that kid's coming up. I mean, I think it's a role that, I think this is might be the best we can.
The
You can't
most,
plan
yeah.
for,
That's what we came up with in the last
Because
round.
also the other thing is we don't know that the new board isn't going to vote for it just the year in the 4th year rather than the 5th year, knowing that they can't do anything to the 5th year, but maybe making that decision and having that conversation. So it might not even be a discussion until the year before, right? We're not saying that we have to give it 5 years till it changes. We're saying that we can't do anything for 5 years.
Right.
So the parents may only have a year notice that it's switching, not the 6 years. So I mean, I think, well, it's an inevitable.
You know, and I can talk about when I was a kid. I mean, I went to Beach Street. I went to Catamount with my big brother. My brother and sister went to Benel across the way. So they split a family. You know, so we went from one school, all of us in one school, to half of us in one school, the other half of the family in the other school. You know, it's across the road, but, you know, that's what they did. There's no rhyme, no reason then. So, I mean, I hate to sound callous, but you just have to pick a date and stick with it, I think.
Yeah, and like Dan said, you gotta hope, you gotta trust the board that's
Yeah.
gonna be elected in to be as,
They're
you know.
politically available
Yeah.
to, you know. So that gets me to the question of, back to Article 10 concept. Do you see this as it is right now under Article 10, or is this something you would leave to the new school board to be able to modify?
I think if it's important enough for us to be having this discussion as long as
It
we've
needs-
had, I think it's important enough for it to be voted on.
I agree.
For Article 10?
I say it needs to be voted on. That's what my
Article
gut
10.
would
No, I
say.
think,
Yeah.
I think
So-
you screw people's minds up with that. If you put too much in Article 10, you're gonna screw
Oh.
everybody's mind up.
Yeah, so are you
Leave the board some decision.
Yeah, so I would, if you were gonna add on some of those other things, I was saying it start to sound like something that would not be in Article 10, but is this something that you feel comfortable giving to the board's ability to modify this if something
If I
happened?
were voting on this as a parent
Yeah.
of kids who just left Monument, I would absolutely say, what is the answer to this question? I would
Yeah.
absolutely want to be
Here's what it
voting
is, but
on
the
it.
board might change it.
Yeah, that's
You would-
fine, but I need to know
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
5 years.
But would you be comfortable with the idea that the board could change
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. But I just need to, I would
No.
need to know as a
Wait.
parent.
No,
for-
but if this isn't Article 10, the board that gets elected, they can go and change the wording and then.
No, I'm saying this needs to be in Article 10.
Right, I agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what
I
I was,
would,
All right, so John's got a
But
different
John-
point of view. Who else has got a point of view on this?
Well, I mean, even if you read it this way, what students, you know, providing education of students that attend elementary school. So that'd take care of your pre-K kids too. If they go to Shasbury, there'd be, your 3-year-olds would be
Yeah.
in Shasbury for the long haul. Or until 2024.
for 5, yeah, until 2024, then anything's possible.
So John's point is let's not muck up Article 10 with unnecessary things. We've also got a point of view that this is really necessary. Other opinions from the group?
I agree with Amy. I think parents are going to have this question, and I think it's something that they're going to be looking for, and they would probably want that 5-year cushion. Because really what it is the 5-year cushion. Not that it can't get changed in the future, but it's that 5-year cushion.
I see your hand, Barry, but I'm going to keep soliciting input from the group here first. So,
And it's also the flip side, the people who are in Bennington, close to Shasbury, who have land in Shasbury, pay taxes in Bennington for their house, they're looking to jump Shasbury. So on the flip side, they want this to happen quicker. So they
Sure.
have the potential to move to a closer school versus
Sure.
a further school. I mean, that's the other side of the coin. Because we've had a couple people who petitioned to move to Shasbury School, but are stuck in the Bennington district because of taxes. So the flip side is
Right.
they're going to want to see
That's
that
a good
date
point.
pushed forward, so they're going to vote against this so they can push it forward versus push it out further. So which way do you want to go is the big question.
But if they vote against it, then they're never going to have the opportunity to change schools because we're not going to merge. So,
You're gonna merge one way or another. Don't say
Yeah.
you're not gonna
Right.
merge.
I think not
You're
much
gonna
enough is the
merge
best
in your
way.
terms, or you're gonna merge in the state terms, but you're gonna merge.
right,
And
agree,
that's,
yeah.
that's the point you had, if, just to play that out a little bit, under Act 49, the state hands you default articles of agreement, and you get 45 days to come up with other ones, or you get theirs. So, you know, that's the other thing. This is a thoughtful deliberation you're having. If you don't vote on it, then you're not gonna have an opportunity really to modify this.
Jim, are you going to help us
Can I
get?
ask a clarification, because I'm confused, so. If it goes into Article 10, it's non-movable, but the new board that gets formed lives with those rules? It's, unless it goes to the voter again to be changed?
That's correct.
But it doesn't
I
kibosh the whole
don't think
thing,
this
right?
belongs in Article 10 in any way, shape, or form, because you're handcuffing the board to something that we don't know what's going to happen. We had this discussion last time, particularly about closing schools, if those of you remember, that everything from you could never close a school to only the town in which the school was physically in, only they could vote to close the school. And we came up with a whole bunch of scenarios where tying something so concretely in the future is really difficult because the example at that time for the school was, what if the school needed $10 million structural repair, and you're saying, and we decided it's not worth to do it, and we put it in Article 10 and the school can never close. So I feel the same way about this. What if we close the school for whatever reason, even for a structural reason, and not even just because we want to close it, and now we need to shift town boundaries or school zones to move students into the school that has availability. The board wouldn't be able to do that if it's in Article 10 without asking the public to take a vote, if I understand it correctly. And that's a very emotional vote.
There's also the point that this will look pretty silly on the ballot in 6 years.
Yeah.
Right? It'll still have to be in the ballot in 6 years?
The ballot's just for the vote that happens now. I mean, this ends up in the Articles of Agreement, but
So if voters were to change it, I guess that's true, it would just hang in there first.
they would just,
Yeah.
if they wanted to modify it at
That's
some
right.
future, there would be a new article and they would,
Well, 5 years will go by more quickly than we can imagine, Jim, but you're right. So there was this notion of flexibility.
And that's what you elect board members for. They're accountable to the public by other ways. And so I would urge that you don't put it in Article 10. To change it would always require a vote.
Jim, do you feel the same way about the school closing one?
No,
No.
I think that would be fine in Article 10 because cases could be made on why a school would need to be closed, and I see us changing school zones more possible than closing the school.
I was just curious.
So, Barry, I'd like to hold public comment till the end, but if you have something very concise you'd like to say on this topic, go ahead.
I just have a question. It says in that paragraph, school district, within the school district, that means the mud district, right?
Yes.
yes.
Yes, right, yes. Just our mud, right.
I'd like to see it standalone
Me too.
as a separate article, and then we in policy can address it as a separate article when we're trying to formulate a policy to deal with it well before.
Would people like to take a vote on it or more discussion? How about a vote?
Let's vote.
All right. Dick, you got something for us?
We leave it where it's at.
Does it have to be addressed as Article 17? Is that
Don't give it a number at this point, just tell you want a language, because the numbers might change.
Call it prior grade configuration language.
Any place but Article 10.
Yeah, there you go.
Then I'll move we designate a separate article for a 5-year operational.
The prior grade configuration language, Richard, yeah, okay. All right, any second?
I'll
Anyone
second
second?
that.
Dan second it? Any discussion? Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay, good.
So I'll mention, I was going to mention at the end, but I'll mention again that, the wording might change in that I might have to, I will change this to make it uniform throughout the article. So this will read something like, in the first 5 years of the new unified district or the modified union district operation, nothing will change substantively, but the style will conform with the other language. So the little kind of wordsmithing will go on there. So back to, and then
Who
this
would like
point.
the second part of
Yeah,
that?
the second part of this, what I'd recommend doing with this is creating a narrative back in the merger report, up in the front part, like these, in these areas here, prior to the, where it's committee findings and you're talking about these different issues and there's sort of discussion of the tax implications, there would be a separate item here, right after here somewhere where necessary, where this discussion, governance and representation, there'd be an item here called school closure that sort of describes the narrative, what's coming up in the articles, and then an item here about school choice at the elementary grade levels and how the committee would recommend new board pursue a policy that would enable that. They see that as a benefit of the merger.
I'd be happy with that if it got blue, bold title. Yeah.
What would be the Blue Bowl title?
I'd like to see inter-district choice.
Yeah, there's nothing that prohibits it. You just can't, I don't think you can compel a school board to pass a policy on something.
But if we could make it as strong a recommendation as possible, that they
Yeah.
make it as accessible as possible, I think that would be in the district's best interest. Not that every person gets to do it every time, but some lottery system or some
Yeah.
fair system that would allow for people who just aren't working out in their school to make a reasonable
Yeah, and it
transfer. And I
works
know,
for-
Jim, you probably already accommodate them, but I'd like to have it in black and white if possible.
No, administratively, it's something that's helpful as well. If you get a student who's, for whatever reason, not working out, it'd be nice administratively to have the ability to move a student. Now it's kind of challenging to do
I
that.
think the flip side of that too is if you move teachers who happen to be in, pick a Shasbury teacher who gets moved to Pownell, for them, for family stuff, if they're expected to have the kid after school, they're teaching in Pownell, they can't pick up that kid after school.
That's
So if they
true,
can move
yeah.
the kid with them
Yep.
for their job, I mean, it does make it easier on family too. So I think having that movement should be there.
So the last other issue I included was just a blurb on local community input. It's not just it's an important aspect of this. I think, there's a general sense of loss of local control. But here's an example of some language. The committee is basically encouraging the new school board to encourage that, create structures to support community participation, such as school committees. So you're not going to have necessarily a school board locally, but encourage the new school board to create a policy or an approach that creates some sort of less formal structure at the local level that involves parents in their schools.
And that'd be greater than like a PT.
Yeah, whatever the new board decided, but just sort of just highlights it as an important concept. Not a new school board for the principal, but create some sort of, invite the new school board to create a structure that would allow.
Dan, you've seen sample language for this all over the state. Is this as robust as it comes?
This is pretty much it, and then, you leave it up to the new school board to figure that out.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the tour de force of the articles. You have some appendices, other data. I'm gonna, like I mentioned, I have data on the impact aid that I'll include as well in here. So basically, we need to decide the name of the district and a date for the vote. Those are two action items that need to be determined at some point, sooner rather than later.
Then can we go back to term of office too?
Yep, yep, absolutely. And those are sort of the only issues I have outstanding. Other than that is at some point moving forward in a process to move forward where you can approve these documents subsequent to word processing errors and things like that.
In the third paragraph of the executive summary, the first line, should it read if North Bennington or any other district? Instead of just if North Bennington votes against the merger?
Right. It's any other district other than Bennington.
Or any other advisory
Yeah.
district.
Yeah,
We still gotta have 3.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay,
or another.
yeah.
Dan, may I ask a question? Dan?
Sure, about what we're...
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to go back to Article 5, the capital debts. Am I to understand that's where the Bennington's $4 million is going to be divided among the outlying districts? Under the Article of Agreement?
Yeah, so all the debts become property of all the, doesn't get divided per se, it just becomes yours. You own it, just like all the buildings, all the assets.
The new district.
But from what I understand, Bennington's taxpayers already approved that.
That's correct.
So why is it being leaked out to the outlying districts?
If you approve the merger, under the law, you have to assume all debts and all assets and all liabilities. So someone has to
I just feel it
own it.
might be a real problem for the town.
Could be.
Major.
Yeah. I've seen districts balk at those kinds of numbers. I've seen districts have no problem with it. It's really a function of to what extent you see yourselves as being one system or not, sometimes.
Because it's the debts
I-
and the.
Yeah, it's gonna be pros and cons.
Well, but I understand, you know, I'm actually almost sold on the one board. But I look at it like, once the board becomes one and they have debts at that point, then I understand why all the districts
Right.
should pay for it. But this is prior too. This doesn't make
Yep.
sense to me. Bennington's taxpayers already agreed to it, and now all of a sudden you're dishing it out to all the outlying districts, and we're talking a lot of money.
Yeah,
But don't forget that Pownell's tax rate goes down, you know, and so Pownell is
You're
actually.
talking about the incentive,
No,
right?
Pownell's getting a bunch,
Even
no,
without
before the
incentive.
incentive. Pownell's
Before the
tax rate
incentive.
goes down significantly, which means that there's a bunch of benefit that's
That's
being
not what I
conferred to
saw.
Pownell.
But
I
for me,
didn't
for
see that.
Shasbury, we go up, which is,
You stay steady, you stay even.
Well, under the new,
incentive, we go down.
yeah, the new numbers he put out, Shaftesbury goes up, what, a penny less? But under the old numbers,
I can tell you, we're gonna have people in Shasbury and say, why should we pay Bennington's bill?
Right.
We've managed our building well, we're not gonna vote
Yeah.
on this because the Shasbury and their board has done a great job managing their debt. We paid off all of our debt, why should we take on more money?
Yep.
They're gonna
And I
say,
think
"We're
that's
not
where
gonna-
Pownell
We're
is
not
going
gonna
to be
buy into
coming
this
from. And
Yeah.
I just hate to see that be
sticky point.
a sticky
Yeah.
point for passing this thing.
It's-
A lot of work has been put into it, but
So,
I just don't understand.
here's
how
the
you-
tax rate information, just so you can see that. In this column here, this is before the incentives kick in. So Pownell's tax rate's gonna go down 7 cents. And the reason it goes down 7 cents is that one of the benefits small districts get of the merger is you're benefiting from the larger economy of scale of the larger districts. Because the larger school districts generally have more efficiency because they operate at a better scale.
so, yeah, so the message to Pownell should be, yes, the debt's being combined, and yes, the assets are being combined, but the tax rate is going down significantly before the incentives.
Yeah.
And with the incentives, it goes down 15 cents,
15
Right.
cents.
which is a big,
Yeah.
big
But you
tax savings.
It's, with this kind of merger, where you're not talking about shutting anything down, you get pros and cons. You know, there's gonna be winners and losers on the tax rate. You know, Woodford's looking at a pretty significant tax increase. With the incentive, it's gonna be 6 cents. But, you know, I think, Dick, you were saying, well, you know, we see it as a chance of our survival as a small school. So every district has to sort of evaluate that.
Well, the other thing is that if you divide those numbers out, you know, the Bennington debt is about a little over $5,000 a pupil. So, you know, if the Woodford people had that much debt, it'd be $123,000. So that's not a very big expenditure, you know, if to get up to the same level of debt. And for Shaftesbury, it'd be something like $570,000 to get up to the same level of debt per pupil that Bennington has right now. So I think the point is that wherever we start, we have to start somewhere, and wherever we start, everybody's going to need maintenance along the way. And
Over a
has-
20-year period, it's going to wash out.
over a 20-year period, it's going to wash
Buildings
out.
wear out, they need new things. And
But how do you sell it to the people who are going to vote
Yeah.
no?
And I think, you know, your job as a committee, you know, if you get over this next phase, your job isn't necessarily to sell this, it's just to educate people about the pros and cons. And there's pros and cons, okay? There is. But I think it's not a neutral conversation. You're not just having an intellectual conversation about pros and cons. It's a context in which you're really looking at the state forcing you to merge. I mean, I say that sincerely because there are really no barriers for you guys to not merge that I can see. I mean, structurally, you're already part of the same system. The only barrier really is North Bennington not operating at the elementary level. I mean, I can't envision a scenario where the state plan would not require you to merge. You're already one system. So, I mean, that's really, as much as there are pros and cons and you can evaluate that and voters can make up their own minds, they need to understand the context is the state's probably going to force you to do this anyway.
I would say for Pownell and Shaftesbury, and John mentioned this, you know, a merger is going to happen of some way, shape, or form. And yes, you're going to pick up some debt, but in the long run, it'll wash out. But you're going to have that control over your destiny of what the formation of what your board is going to look like. And for towns other than Bennington, I would think that would be extremely important that it stays as the Mount Anthony model, which is not guaranteed under a forced merger. We don't know what model of governance the state would impose. So that for me, would be a selling point. Not downplaying what the debt is, but control of knowing in advance the seats that you're going to get on that merged board.
And I would say, just knowing how sensitive Bennington voters are to tax rates, if we gave up an opportunity to get those tax incentives, those tax rate incentives, I just wouldn't want to face voters and say that we didn't make an effort. If they voted down, they voted down, but we gave them what we think is a
For a
reasonable
substantial
merger
tax
and
savings,
a
yeah.
substantial tax savings. I know it's short term, it's 4 years, but 4 years of tax savings is significant. And I just don't want to be part of a, I don't want to be able to look to, I don't want to have to say to my voters, we couldn't get this done, so you don't have the opportunity to vote on something that will give you a significant tax reduction.
And again, it's a messaging that every building's going to have situations that come up with these same things where they need maintenance. It wasn't, a failure to maintain them. I mean, it just had to happen. It was the age of the buildings, so forth and so on. It just had to happen. So, and it's for the benefit of the children that attend these schools. And it's about the kids, so we really need to bring them back into it.
And Cindy, Nelson bent my ear on this topic for a long time, and I am sympathetic to it. And I talked to Dan at length about it, and he was unable to give me any examples of a merger anywhere that did any kind of partitioning of the debt. It's either you're in or you're not in, and I think that's kind of the point we're at right now. And it may be an impossible sell in Shaftesbury, it may be an impossible sell in Pownell, and maybe we don't get it, and maybe Woodford loses its small school grant, and a whole bunch of bad things could happen if we don't get it. But it seems like we're on a track to try.
That's the main thing, you're trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you gave it your best effort, and this is a pretty good, this is a short time frame. You guys, you put it together, I think, and so,
Practically miraculous, Dan. I mean, if we get a vote tonight to move this forward with just whatever edits you and I need to do clerically, we could have this into the Agency of Education next week.
right. But the most difficult question is still before you.
Yeah.
The name of the board.
Name of the school.
I think that's going to be the most fun one, actually.
Does the name have to, since the existing situation dies, when this comes into place, why can't you just continue it as Mount Anthony?
You could.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Mount Anthony Elementary.
Why not?
They don't have to change their stationery.
It's just the name of the school district, not the school, so.
Mount Anthony School District.
Yeah, we need to name it something. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to include modified union in it. It can just be something school district. But we
Ben
need a-
Shaft Wood Pow.
I think we name it Pownell in honor of the debt.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
You bought the naming rights.
Well, it could be Southern Vermont this or Southwestern Vermont that, but it seems like it should be MAU.
That's how it's known throughout the state. That's
Right,
sports.
and our high
that's-
schools called that, or middle schools call that.
I mean, the spirit of this whole merger thing has really been to say, MAU is working, MAUHS is working, let's just expand it and make it work for everybody in these towns.
The
So,
name of the game is money, and if we're trying to save money, we don't need to change all the football uniforms and everything else.
That's a really good point.
That's a good point.
Move Mount Anthony.
Second,
So,
all right, we have a motion to call it the Mount Anthony School District.
Does it have to be Unified School District?
Mount
Because
Anthony.
it's MAU?
Do you want to call it Mount Anthony Union School District?
Mount
It is
Anthony Union School District,
In the spirit of saving money.
MAU. Mount Anthony Union School District.
Right, and then you don't have to change anything.
All right, we won't change anything. Any further discussion on the naming?
So it's the Mount Anthony Union School District.
Yes. MAUSD. Does it spell anything nasty?
I know.
Nasd? No, I think we're all right on the acronym.
Yeah. You got to think about it as like a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is,
No, don't do that.
no,
Don't go
I'm just
there.
saying,
Let's just take
trust
the
me,
vote.
you do.
All in favor of
No, it looks good.
MAUSD, say aye. Aye. All right. Opposed? No. Good. All right.
And the next issue was a date for the vote. It has to happen before November 30th. Jim's office was talking to the town clerks about their thinking around this. It's important to consider their aspect. If you want to have a potential 30-day window for a revote, that pushes it into October. As soon as we can get it to the state board is September 18th. So state board votes on it the 18th, the 19th, you know what you're doing, you could send out a warning. It has to be no more than 45 days, no fewer than 30 days in advance. But we could certainly warn it prior to the state board vote and hope the state board approved it. It probably wouldn't be a good idea.
Is there any, like, do we have to hold any, like, public forums to educate people?
Yeah, I mean, this committee's is not required to do that per se, but you know, we'll talk about public engagement, I think, you know, what the committee's going to be doing. But no, there's no, it's not like a school district, well, I should say, the school boards will be required to do some sort of public information session. It is a special meeting in the school districts, and there is a requirement that they hold, the boards do. So there's going to have to be some coordination around that. This committee would probably occupy a significant role in that, I would think.
Dan, can we count on you to make a presentation?
That's up to, you know, Jim's direction, if you guys want
I think he's done
to.
a great job so far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's-
Why
And I
would we change?
typically help draft some FAQs and things like that,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
That'd be great if you could help us with that outreach piece that would
Yeah.
include something we can
Yeah.
hand people, something
Yeah.
we can put on the web, something we can spread around by email.
Just so people understand what it is. It's just,
Most people don't
Yeah,
even know what we're talking about.
they're gonna wake up come September, that's what I find, you know, once school year starts, people get interested in these things again, so it's good. So I don't, Jim, did you have any suggested dates or any?
Renee has dates from our October 10th. From the-
Yeah,
And I confirmed that with all the town clerks.
okay.
Is that,
It might be one of those cases where we warn it prior to state board approval, with the understanding that we would shut it down if they.
Yeah. That has happened in
Yeah,
some of the
it
other
has.
districts.
In this kind of aggressive timeline, it
Yeah.
makes sense, though, to get it in on to give you the 30-day thing if you need to.
What happens if North Bennington doesn't want it?
Well, that's going to be an issue. So if they don't warn it at all, then the merger can't happen.
and we need to have, if they refuse, we need to have a petition in by when?
Well, it would have to be, the warning has to go out no fewer than 30 days, no more than 45 days. So it would have to be in that sort of time frame. Jim's office will help coordinate the warnings for the clerk to make sure they're tabulated or formatted correctly, get the ballot set up properly. So, you know, it'd be good to start having those conversations with them sooner rather than later.
Almost immediately.
and how many signatures do they need?
10% or something?
I don't think it's that many. I think it's 5, but I'm not up on municipal law.
Do we have a sense about,
Dan French, can you speak up?
I'm sorry.
Answer that again, please, with the letter.
So the North Bennington has to consider this matter in order for the merger to happen because they're members of the Mount Anthony Union School District. So all members of Mount Anthony Union School District have to consider it. Doesn't mean they have to approve it, they have to put it on their ballot. Since North Bennington's listed as an advisable district to the merger, advisable districts don't have to warn the vote at all. It's up to their school boards to decide to warn it or not. This committee cannot compel a school district that's advisable to the merger to warn the vote. So the school board can decide on its own authority to warn it, yes or no, and if they decide no, a petition of voters in North Bennington can compel the North Bennington School Board to warn it. So it'd be good to start sounding them out on that. I'm sure the state would be very interested in their disposition towards this as well.
Yes, Secretary Holcomb's expressed a personal interest in this.
Yeah, I think, well, it just becomes challenging for them. They're still going to have, assuming they vote no, they're still going to have to submit a plan to the state in December. And if part of their plan is acknowledgement that they refuse to even consider this, I think that puts them in a tough spot. I'm not sure what that means, but it certainly would be neighborly if they would at least consider it.
It would be neighborly if they would do it.
Can we talk timeline for a minute? 'Cause I'm thinking we're mid-August.
Yeah.
So each board is going to have a meeting to decide to warn this or
Other than Bennington's necessary district, so this committee compels that to be warned in the community of Bennington. The school board doesn't have a role in that.
okay. So well, I'm thinking time like, Shaftesbury has already had their August meeting, and so as in Bennington's not. Pownell is meeting next
Next week.
week.
you'd have to amend your agenda. I think your agenda's already been approved for next week. So, right, this has to be an item on their agenda that they vote that they're going to
They have to approve the warning,
approve the warning.
and the ballot item has to be on the warning, so. So we need, we need the ballot language to be tightened up sooner rather than later, and that includes district attorney's approval as well as the AOE's approval, but that's all doable before the end of August.
Yeah.
So I think, you're looking at probably end of August sometime, having the boards agree.
Special meetings of the
Yeah,
boards to do this.
having them agree to warn it, at least, put it before their voters, give their voters a chance to vote on it. And I think that's still doable. I think, the bottleneck we've identified, it sounds like the recommended date is October 10th. So you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to be warning something prior to the state board approving it. But I think as long as the AOE is on board with the language, the state board doesn't usually modify articles of agreement. So I think it's safe, and you can always pull the meeting if you need to. You can cancel it.
So Dan, I hate to do this. I know it seems like you want to leave it vague, but I think it's time for us to be specific about North Bennington and about an approach to North Bennington. We really need them
Yeah.
to take a vote. We really need them to take a vote. And I don't know, Jim, what you think the best route to that would be, but I've had personal interactions with people on the North Bennington School Board that said, we're not going to take a vote. So I guess we can ask them again, although I expect them to say no. And then maybe North Bennington citizens will take up a petition, but I'm not sure what the deadline for that would be.
Would be North Bennington, Shasbury.
Well, it's the North Bennington School District.
North Bennington School District, right.
It's going to be somewhere in the beginning of September. I mean, it's no more than 40 days from October 10th, and no fewer than 30 days from October 10th.
45 days?
40, no more than 45, no fewer than 30. So September has 30 days, so it's going to be somewhere between September 1st and, or last week of August and September 10th.
That the petition has to be completed?
That the meeting has to be warned. So the petition has to happen prior. If they're going to petition, it has to happen before that.
So is there any point in me or Jim or you reaching out to the state and asking them for whatever help they can give us on this?
Certainly, we certainly can have that conversation with the state. I think you formally should probably reach out to North Bennington and say, this committee has determined it's advisable. We're in the process of finalizing our articles, and we'd like to know what your disposition is going to be towards warning this or not.
State rep or
Yeah, state reps, whatever, whatever it takes to get a clear answer out of that.
get a hold of the state rep for North Bennington and then.
Well, it'd be Alice Miller too, because it's Shasbury.
Huh?
It'd be Alice, because it's Shasbury too. So
Yeah. well,
Yeah.
Get a hold of Alice.
When is North Bennington's next regularly scheduled meeting?
voted for this.
It was supposed to be last night. They didn't hold a August meeting, so it would be the second Wednesday of September is their next regularly scheduled meeting.
Yeah, it's too late, right?
Too late.
Yeah.
I mean, Alice voted for Act 46 merger at the state level. She was on the committee. I mean, I think she is the Shasbury rep.
Brian
She is-
Campion, he thought it was a great
She's in
idea.
the district, so I mean, I think we approach her. She is District 1.
We're getting a request from the audience to speak up if they can't hear our
So
conversation.
I mean, I think that's one place we have to start, is with that one rep that we know of.
You need 80, I think it's 85 signatures, so maybe the smartest thing is if there are people in North Bennington School District that want to vote, they should start. If you know anybody.
85 signatures?
Why do you need 85
I think
signatures?
isn't it 5% of the
I
population?
think it's 5.
To overrule if the board
If the board decides
decides
not to
not to, that they're not going to schedule the
It has to
vote,
be community
you
driven.
can petition the community. the
and then they have
community
to,
can
they
petition.
have to do it.
Yeah, but I don't think you need 85, right?
Well, I think Don's point, right, we should reach out first.
Right.
Give them the opportunity before that is pursued to.
Yeah, but do it all at the same time. I don't like doing one thing at a time. Do everything at once. Get everybody at the same time. Okay? You start asking people, oh, well, I'll tell you next week, or I'll tell you in 2
He's so
weeks.
shy.
No, ask them all at
Tell
the
us
same
what he
time
really feels like.
and get something moving. Simple as that. Don't start saying, well, let's do this week, do this next week. It's crazy. Do it all.
Well, we fully expect North Bennington to vote this down, but we need them to vote it down for us to proceed. And we need them to vote it down for us to receive these tax benefits. And there are a lot of people that would receive tax benefits from this, so maybe that would be a compelling message to them.
Yeah, because what is their, if they know that their taxpayers are going to,
I mean, they'll say a decrease of 22 cents. So as a taxpayer of North Bennington,
Maybe they won't.
District 1, I mean,
If you think you're paying too much tax in North Bennington, take a look at this number.
take a look at this number, this is what you could be paying.
But that assumes that they're going to vote for merger. They just have to vote.
That's right.
We just
They
need them to
don't- they can
vote.
vote it
They don't
down
want to be
and-
part of
and we
this.
can
We just
still
need them to
vote.
vote. Yeah.
But you never know how the votes they turn out.
Yeah.
That's why they're.
That's why they don't want to vote.
That's why it may be scheduled.
Too bad we couldn't bring them in on this, but, so we're at a standstill on that. I guess I would like to reach out to Secretary Holcomb and see what she has to say.
Yeah.
Is that appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and would you like to reach out to Alice? Would you be,
I'm not gonna have much time in the next 2 weeks,
would you like me to?
if you don't mind.
Okay, I'd be glad to. But I think first I'd like to reach out to North Bennington and just
Yeah.
ask them if they would be willing to do this on a neighborly basis. So I'll try to do that first, and then I'll keep you all posted.
so what is our drop dead date? I think we need to figure that out.
Well, I figure if this gets to, assuming we set a date of October 10th, which you guys still need to take action on, there'll be a revision period to the document. What I'd suggest is giving Don the ability to finalize any word processing changes, as long as they're not substantive. And then next week, and if they are substantive, then the committee meets again. Like I said, I'm going to include just the table on impact aid that doesn't, and some narration. But I think next week, that puts us into mid-August. It'll probably take the AOE another week to sign off on it, and the attorney, depending on his availability. So somewhere around the end of the third week of August should be sort of like Fisher cut date in terms of what you're doing.
In terms of like, how much time do we give North Bennington to mull it over, if they do need to mull it over, before we start working to petition taxpayers?
Because if they won't schedule a vote and a
Right.
petition drive fails, there's no sense having any of the communities vote.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, save the money
That's-
of
Yeah, that's what I'm trying
going to the
to,
polls.
I'm trying to
So,
figure out what that date
Dawn,
is.
you reach out, we can reach out to North Bennington immediately and get a sense of whether they're willing to schedule a vote. And if not, if there's somebody from North Bennington willing to do a petition drive, that would have to happen.
Pretty much the next week.
Right.
Next week,
Started, because
Yeah.
Because if we go back to to get the clerk of North Bennington, or it's actually the Bennington clerk that would schedule the election in North Bennington, what, you said 45 days from,
No longer than, it has to
No
be
lo-
warned, no
Yeah.
longer than 45, no fewer than 30. So at least 30 days away from the vote.
which we said is last week of August, first week of September.
Yeah.
So right around Labor Day.
Well, I move we schedule a merger vote for October 10th. You need that, right?
Yeah, we need a date.
Okay, so we have October 10th moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the date for a vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? All right, so we now have a deadline.
And just for clarification, if you're gonna run for that new board, they have to have their name in as well for that vote date.
Yeah.
That's a
we'll
good
get
point,
all
too.
that- We'll get all that organized.
So
When does that?
I'll bet that makes it in the banner article.
So, so
Getting
it'll be
a thumbs up
open,
there.
So you have to have that the 45 to 30
so you
days
need
before,
the-
right?
whatever signatures your town requires,
Again.
again, so.
Yeah, and you do have, I hate to say it, but you do have, if it all falls apart, I mean, you can schedule a vote prior to November 30th. You're just not going to have the 30-day, you know?
Right,
So, I
so it
mean,
gets challenged.
if it gets, you know, if we end up really, we've adopted the most aggressive timeline possible.
If we had to, we could push.
But if you had to, you could schedule it prior to Thanksgiving, you know, if North Bennington need more time. You're just not gonna have the opportunity for a petition or reconsideration.
If it passes before November 30, and then there's a petition for reconsideration and that fails, so it's still
Right,
in place, we're still okay,
Yes.
right? But if it fails,
that's right.
so I guess it doesn't really matter if we fail.
Failure's a failure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, we're not thinking about November yet. We're still thinking about October 10th.
yeah.
October 10th.
Yeah.
We're going to see what we can do for October 10th.
If we can't get that date, though, we can reconnect and vote for another date.
Yeah, so the future of this committee is this committee stays intact.
Yes, your committee continues to exist until such time as the voters vote. So the committee's role shifts into sort of, helping voters educate, not selling them, but just educating them sort of even handily on what they're going to need. There is still, I would suggest it would be helpful to the process if you authorize Don to approve any final changes to the report, provided they're not substantive. That would expedite our editing process.
So moved.
Thank you, gentlemen. So these would just be kind of clerical typos, small things. If it's anything substantial,
We'll have another.
we would have another meeting. We've got one tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, but if with this permission, I think we might not need that Tuesday meeting, which
It
I'm
has not
sure.
been warned.
What's that?
It has not been warned.
Has not been warned. So, okay, so all in favor of that?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Great. Okay, thank you. We will get something to the Agents of Education next week.
If we
And then
spoke to-
let's schedule another meeting. When would be the critical time? End of September, beginning of September?
Yeah, so you think about if the agency signs off and you get North Bennington's on board, you're moving forward, parents are coming back to school, school's open. I don't know when your open houses are, but certainly thinking about, going out and talking to select boards, talking to school boards, talking to anyone who listens to you, but also convening some sort of public event, some forums, handing out a frequently asked question, giving people a chance to ask questions about pros and cons of it.
So that feels to me a little bit like phase two. Phase one would
Right.
be, are we even going to have the vote? What's
Right.
happened to
And
North
that's-
Bennington? Are we
Yep.
pushing? I mean, it feels to me like we should have one more meeting early in September. No? People are meeting out.
Never.
Well, but you might want to coordinate the message.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to look at a tentative date then, or you want to wait and see what happens with?
I would like people to save, I don't know, is September 7th too late? Dan, to be useful? If we were, there would still be time if we had to do a petition or something at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be looking at maybe a different date than the 10th,
Yeah.
that kind of scenario.
You're not going to get a petition in time if you start on the 7th. You probably need that petition in before the end of August.
Is that right?
I don't know because I assume it has to be posted in the banner. I mean, they have several late days up before they can post. The clerk has to certify all the signatures. It's not like it happens immediately.
So it'd have to be before Labor Day,
Yeah.
just to be safe.
When do you think, Dan? You think August 31st?
I think that's the absolute latest.
So what are we doing at the meeting?
Well, I feel like there are unknowns at this point, and I feel like we don't,
Just to regroup on that?
well, regroup and decide whether or not we're having the vote, or
Yeah.
whether we're putting the vote off, or whether we're abandoning the effort altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good time. We should know by then, right, if North Bennington's gonna vote.
And that's
If the
when-
petition to be successful, we'll know some things. 31st worked for me.
Would you be starting the petition before then? Yeah.
August.
I think we probably
We have
would be
to.
starting the petition before then if
We have to.
if we had to go that route, yeah.
I'm out of town that day, but the 31st,
Are you out that whole week, or just that one day?
that whole week.
That whole week, okay. So can everybody else do the 31st?
Yes.
Okay.
What time?
Jim, do you think we can get the CDC back?
Yeah, should be able to. verify
6 o'clock? 6 o'clock, okay?
Yep.
Okay, next meeting is 6 o'clock, August 31st. CDC. And I think we'll keep you posted by email between now and then.
Before we finish up, Don, can we just go back to the board structure?
Oh, yeah.
Because we made North Bennington very heavy there. You know, if they're not going to vote or if they're not going to be there, you could play a different thing. So my proposal is Bennington does 1, 2, 1. North Bennington, they have the 1 year as a one-person seat and then one as 2-year seat.
What page, Jeff?
Page 19.
So 1, 2.
So Bennington would be 1, 2, 1. I think North Bennington should be 1 and 1. Whether it be Pownell or Shasberry, one of them has to be a 1, nothing, and a 1. And then Shasberry can be nothing, 1, 1. And Woodford gets a 1 and a 3-year seat.
Okay, would you go through that one more time for me,
Okay, so
please?
Bennington, for the 2019,
Yep.
go down that first row.
Yep.
Bennington would have 1,
Yep,
North Bennington has 1, Pownell has 1, and that gives you your 3.
okay.
And the,
0.
for the 2-year seat, Bennington would have 2 people,
Mm-hmm.
North Bennington would have 1, Pownell would have nothing there, Shasberry would have 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the 3-year seat, Bennington would have 1, North Bennington would have 0, Pownell would have 1, Shasberry would have 1, and Woodford would have 1.
3, 4, yeah.
So then it would be 3,
3,
4.
4.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're trying to get the 3-year seats in for the districts that
For
are
all
likely to
districts outside this
merge.
table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, the side of this table, right, okay. 3-year looks good.
And I mean, you can go either way. I mean, I guess it's Pownell's choice, what you guys want to do. I mean, either Pownell or Shasberry has to have a 1-year seat and one has to have a 2-year seat, so.
What is next election? What does that row mean?
So when does the election actually occur for the seats? So they have to be staggered out.
Yeah.
So every term is a 3-year term, but the elections come up at different times.
So the election,
So, yeah, it is kind of confusing. So the initial election will be at the merger vote on October 10th,
yeah.
okay? The term of office of those directors doesn't start until the organizational meeting that the secretary convenes, let's say January 1st. Okay, so their term of office begins. This first blurb on the front end of this talks about their term of office being whatever the 3 years plus the additional time on the stagger. So their term of office there'll be no election held in the spring of 2018. Okay? So if your term of office starts in January 2018, remember the merger vote happened in October 2017, secretary convenes the meeting in January, term of office starts, it really includes that time till March 2018 and then a full year. And then in 2019 is when the first election will occur. At that election, these 3 slots will be up. And at the end of this 3-year cycle process, eventually everyone will be staggered out on 3-year terms.
Okay.
So essentially the 3 people are 1-year seats that get elected.
Yes.
First time up,
For the first time.
Yep.
So you're really running for a 1-year seat,
that's right.
potentially.
Yeah,
So
so
we're
1
gonna-
year,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. If that's where people are heading on this, it's confusing, but it's got to stagger itself out. I can make the changes here if you think that, if everyone's agreeable to that, so you can see it on the screen.
Would you be willing to make the changes here and then ask us if we're agreeable,
Yep.
please?
I won't save the document, okay? So, sir, if you'd be so kind.
The first line would be for Bennington, be 1, 2, 1.
Hang on, you're going way too fast for me. 1 for Bennington, 2
Yeah.
for North Bennington?
No, then.
No, we're going
I
across.
went across.
Got it, I didn't know which way you were going.
Then 1.
Yep,
And for the next row would be 1, 1, and nothing. And then Pound would be 1. They would have nothing in the middle, and then have 1 in the 3-year seat. Then Shaftesbury would be nothing, 1, 1.
And then Woodford stays
So
at
the
one.
balance would be.
So all the numbers stay the same,
Yeah.
totals, yeah,
Yeah.
so it works.
Okay, so does anybody have any concerns with this? Good thinking, Jeff. I like it.
So the ballots
You
would
must have good
read,
genes.
For Bennington, you would have 1 1-year seat, 2 2-year seats, and 1 3-year seat.
Yes.
Yes.
And then so forth.
You got
same
it.
thing for the other
You got
ones.
it.
Okay.
Don't lose it, because I'll need it back.
Would anybody like to make this formal?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor of making this change? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Dan,
I
you got
said
it. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
All right, we have a brief time moment here for public comment. If there is anybody in the peanut gallery that would like to speak, Mike Cutler, our fearless Cat TV person, has asked if you'd please come up to the microphone because the sound is terrible in this room. So, any comments?
I just have a question.
Yeah, please.
Because it was hard to hear during the conversation.
Okay. Would you state your name, please?
Renee Gordon,
I know.
Director of Finance for SVSU. On the prior grade configuration language that you had up there, it referenced the town of residence, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen to the District 1
No.
folks, because it is saying town.
District 1 is,
There's Shaftesbury,
Oh,
it's
okay.
Shaftesbury Town, but North Bennington School District.
got it. Okay,
So,
yeah, it's a
I
wrinkle. We'll
think
have
the way
to,
that
yeah.
it's written, all of those.
The intention is to keep kids where they are currently, right?
Right,
Yes.
them in their
Yeah.
current district.
Right.
District, yeah.
So that District 1, those are the students who essentially have school choice,
Yes.
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Renee, have you been through this whole document top to bottom? Have you, because that's a great point, but have you been through all of this?
There you are, right there, so prior grade configuration.
Yeah.
If you scroll up, Liam, actually.
Right there.
So it's that first sentence.
For the first 5 years, it was fully operated private service. Students will attend the elementary school in their town of residence.
Should be their
Okay.
current
Yeah.
Their
or
District,
current.
school district?
current school district.
Your school district?
Yeah.
Is that what?
In their
You're
district.
thinking?
Well, I wasn't sure what the intent was. If it was District 1, and that can even be possible, I don't know. For District 1 to be dissolved, maybe those Shaftesbury residents actually send their kids to Shaftesbury. and
Right.
Bennington.
Let me think about that.
That's a substantive.
That might be a substantive change.
Let's chat.
Let me ponder it for a minute.
Let's, Jim, you got some suggestions for us?
If they don't vote to join us,
Right.
it's not an issue. We don't anticipate that. And if they did vote to join us,
They
Would
couldn't
they-
attend their current elementary
they
school
couldn't.
because it wouldn't exist
Because it
anymore.
doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Would they be voting as Shaftesbury or
No, we
North
District.
Bennington?
It'd be
they'd
North
be
Bennington School
voting their
District.
current school
School
district
district,
voting. So they'd
okay.
be voting
In North Bennington?
in North Bennington.
That answers your concern.
So I,
That's so confusing.
So the current elementary
Yeah,
school
current's
operated
gotta
by
be-
the district?
Yeah.
We need something.
Students
we
will
don't
attend.
operate their school, so we,
The current, the elementary school currently operated by the district?
Right, because he had said before, the town didn't make any difference. He said that back at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, but for Shaftesbury, make a difference. Because if you said by the town, the District 1 would have to go to Shaftesbury School if they approve it.
Right, but at the beginning of the meeting, he said it didn't make any difference whether you're in Shaftesbury or North Bennington. If you were in North Bennington District, it had nothing to do with the town.
That's right.
Yes, so
That
you
was set up
you just had to make
for,
sure it's
2
cleaned
hours
up.
ago.
Yeah.
There's smoke coming out of Dan's ears, so he's onto something.
Yeah, I know if I
Let's give
thought
him a
about it
minute.
5 minutes from now, I could get it, but I'm sorry to get to that part of the evening. So basically what we want to do is make sure the students are staying where they are currently. I'm just thinking of Bennington as well, operating multiple schools, right?
Right.
So, and operated by the district gets us out of the North Bennington scenario because we don't operate a school. So we're concerned about students remaining in schools where the district operates. We want them to stay put or not at least be worried about moving, right?
Doesn't look like a substantive change.
Yeah. First is fully operational prior to students will.
Well, so I think Dan and I have we could do some wordsmithing on this, but I think Dan and I have the concept
Agreement
here.
of what
The
Could you
concept
say
is-
that
premise
district
is
elementary
that
school?
people stay in the school they're currently in
Yeah.
for 5 years.
I mean, you could say the district elementary school operated by the district. Because that would cover Bennington with 3 schools.
Mhm.
It'd be the district's elementary schools operated by the districts.
Attend elementary school operated by the district they are attending as of. Okay, so that's the concept. Can Dan and I
Yep.
Can Dan and I work with that concept as long as we get that
Yes.
done? Okay, Renee was an excellent
Go for it.
catch. Thank you for that.
Can I ask you another question on another? So on the supervisory union configuration, I know we kind of said that still needs to be worked out, but there's wording that says, each member district that operates a school is afforded 3 representatives. So what if you're a non-operating district?
You get one. That's what the law says, right?
So if this merger went and North Bennington actually, scheduled the vote and they voted not to join, so would the supervisory union board be 4 members?
Well, it's an interesting point because they would still have a town school or an independent school district, right?
Yeah.
A non-operating, they'd have one.
Yeah.
This other thing would have 3, right?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
So the point would be the new SU board is going to want to petition the state board to reconfigure
An
that.
odd number, yeah.
Well, just to make it closer to the populational, so that would be, they might say, well, you come up, we'd have to look at the census information, say something like, well, North Bennington's going to get 3 and the new district's going to have 4 or 5 or something like that. But, I mean, that's going to be one of the issues for them is that they're going to be substantially outvoted on that board.
I would say the 3-to-1 pretty much matches the population.
It could very well work out that way,
What kind of services is SVSU going to provide?
Special education services.
Yeah.
administration,
Same
For North Bennington or for
superintendent
everybody?
Everybody. Yeah, so unfortunately,
Whole nother
you're not going to be able to dissolve the SU structure, which would be the ultimate in transparency. You're still going to have an SU budget. The bulk of the costs, the bulk of the assessments will be in the new district.
But you're
Okay.
saving money, don't worry.
But in practical operations, it really would be, since almost all the functions would be in the new district.
Right.
I don't see a
Very
very
small.
active SU board. It would be orderly at best in my
At
thought.
best, probably, yep.
With the new entity board would be the one that is frequently.
Other citizens' questions or comments? David?
So I think I'm going to rework this a little bit. I hear what you're saying. It just reads, yeah.
Hi, David Durfee from Shaftesbury. Yeah, first of all, I wanted to just commend everybody for the progress you've made in this. I wanted to just ask about North Bennington again. You all think it's unlikely that they will vote to approve if in fact it's on ballot. But if the unlikely happened and they did vote to approve joining what, would that be tantamount to them deciding not to have school choice anymore? The students then be, where would those students attend elementary school?
Well, they,
First 5 years, they'd be stuck where they are.
if I understand correctly, if the unlikely scenario that one, they vote to hold the vote, to schedule a vote, and the vote went that the voters of North Bennington voted to join the district, those students would be going to one of the elementary schools in the new entity, and the school choice would not exist, which is really what the sticking point is. So
Yeah.
that those students would be going somewhere in the new Mount Anthony Union School District.
I thought
Wouldn't
they
they-
couldn't change
yeah.
the structure.
I thought wouldn't they have to like change their operating?
That's right, that's what Jim's saying, is
Yeah.
that they would no longer be a non-operating district. They would be
Right.
part of this larger structure, and therefore the
So,
students would
I
have
mean,
to
I
attend a
suppose
school operated by the
You're
district.
going to
There wouldn't
talk
be
really
tuition or
wild
anything.
scenarios. Well, the North Bennington graded school could come back and be a public school, I guess. But it, you know,
It's currently not operated by the district.
currently not operate because the Prudential Committee has retained ownership of that building. So, yeah, and I guess that brings up another point. So if they voted to merge, I mean, if the vote was successful to merge, then wouldn't that become an asset of the new Mount Anthony Union District?
Unless they dispose of it otherwise.
Dispose of during the process.
Right,
David,
wouldn't they
what-
have to vote to make it change the operating structure at the same time?
They would be, by
They would be,
approving the
in
merger,
fact,
they
They
would.
would be doing that,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what they would be doing.
There are quite a few contortions, David, in trying to answer that question. We think it's a wildly hypothetical question, but you're right to ask it. Is there some other reason you're asking?
No, just in the interest of educating everyone, including the voters of North Bennington, to get the opportunity to vote, so that everybody's clear on what the implication would be. I mean, I think that's a critical one, and particularly who owns the building. I mean, I have to agree that my sense is that the people of North Bennington would not vote in favor of it. I'm a little optimistic that the board, the Prudential Committee, might be willing to do what we think is the right thing and warrant vote.
Okay, any other public comment? Any last thoughts from the committee? We have a date. We're going to get this thing in next week.
We're getting back together on the 31st.
We're getting back together on the 31st, so I want to thank you all really, really, from the bottom of my heart for sticking with this through the hardest weeks of the summer. I just can't believe the attendance during July and August, and Dan in particular, thank you for
No problem.
being such an incredible leader on this. It does feel like, thank you David also for mentioning it, but it does feel like we've really gotten somewhere during the course of this summer, which is a hard time to do anything, and I'm really appreciative to all of you. So,
Thank you for your
all right.
leadership.
So I take a motion to adjourn. If one's
John just made it, I'll second it.
No, yes.
okay, all in favor?
This-
Motion.
It's good.
See you on the 31st.
Good, you're good.